Hi, this is Kate. Welcome to Blooms in the Yard. Last year, I helped a friend to redo the plantings in her backyard, and today we're going to look at the before and after. I ran into her last February or March, and she said she was wanting to redo her backyard, which was full of daylilies that had just spread everywhere. She was trying to hire a landscaper to dig out the lilies and install fresh plantings. I visited her yard to give her some ideas for plants and suggested that she ditch the river rocks and the landscape fabric when I saw that a few things she had planted were not doing well. She also had a mismatched jumble of different brick and landscape blocks for her edging. Long story short, after trying several times to hire someone to do the job, we ended up doing it ourselves because no one would ever show up. It took the two of us months to sort through the rocks and mud, pull up all of the landscape fabric, which was buried 6 inches deep below the rocks and mud, and dig up all of the daylilies. We started the job in March and didn't finish until October. We did take off for the last half of July and all of August once it got too hot. Once we got one area cleaned out, we would plant it. I'm going to show you the areas in the order that we did them. As soon as you enter Charlotte's backyard through a gate, you see this area to your right. She can also see this area from her kitchen window. This was one area she had already cleaned the rocks out of, so we just had to remove the landscape fabric and a little bit of rocks toward the back by the fence. We removed the brick edging, which you can see was pretty mismatched and wonky. We went with a simple trenched edge, and Charlotte was able to sell the bricks on Facebook Marketplace for money to buy plants. We have added some brunnera, some turtlehead in the back, and some big root geranium. The large shrub anchoring this space is the Alice oakleaf hydrangea. It will be big enough for her to see from her window. To the left of the oakleaf hydrangea, we have planted some blue columbine and some hostas. There was an existing big leaf hydrangea here that was barely alive due to its roots being so tangled in landscape fabric. She said within 1 month of removing the fabric, it looked better than it ever had. And then we have some more big root geranium around this tree. These are a columnar pear tree, by the way. Remember that we had to remove all the dirt and mulch on top of the landscape fabric before we could do anything with this area. The tree roots had all grown into the fabric as well. We removed quite a few daylilies and buried bricks. This next section gets a little more sun, so I put in some black-eyed Susans and behind them 3 quick-fire hydrangeas. The hydrangeas need some time to mature and then they should be taller than the black-eyed Susans. In the meantime, I suggested to Charlotte that she cut down the back half of the black-eyed Susans to give the hydrangeas some space to grow. This week was the first time I had been back since last fall. I wasn't sure what to expect, but she's been doing an amazing job keeping everything weeded and watered. Further down, we planted a big patch of the native ageratum, sometimes called mist flower. This can be an aggressive grower, but she has a lot of space in her yard, and so I thought that it would do okay here. And then we get to the dry creek bed area. After we removed all of the brick edging, there were tons of rocks and weeds to contend with. We dug out the dry creek bed, put down a heavy-duty landscape fabric, and put the washed-off rocks back into the creek bed. This was a huge undertaking. This is a very wet area when it rains, so it took a few attempts to get the drainage right. There were days where we were covered in mud. On either side of the creek bed, we planted Siberian iris and my tried and true sedum. The back right corner gets very waterlogged, so we planted liatris and bee balm, which are suggested for rain gardens. The bushes to the right of that are Little Henry Itea or sweetspires. I was ready to remove these from my garden, so I gave them to Charlotte. To the left of the creek bed, we planted black-eyed Susans, salvia, penstemon, sedum. All of the sun-loving things I know do well for us here. And this area is raised up, so I thought that they wouldn't be too waterlogged. We also planted a green giant arborvitae as the main tree in this area. She wanted an evergreen since it kind of is what is blocking her view of the road. On the trellis, we planted a major wheeler honeysuckle, which has performed very well for me in my area. You can see it's already blooming and at the top of the trellis after only 1 year. This small but sprawling shrub is an opulus viburnum, which I've had in my garden and I really enjoy. I think this was actually growing out of the roots from my viburnum and I gave it to Charlotte, and it's coming in pretty well. The pinkish purple flowers are purple poppy mallow, which is a native, which was taking over my vegetable garden, but here I thought it would have plenty of space to sprawl. These Asiatic lilies are pretty sparse. This was a low wet spot, so I knew it was a risk to put Asiatic lilies here, but I was getting rid of them anyway. I told Charlotte, since they aren't doing well now, that she should probably move them over to her peony garden on the other side of the yard if she wants to keep them. Then we have some more of that native ageratum, and it looks like maybe a few daylilies are coming back in front of that. Here's a picture of this area before, and you can see that the area was full of daylilies growing in river rock, and we've removed the brick edging. We have added some irises and 3 Scentlandia itea. Charlotte was really enjoying the little Henry itea on the other side of her creek bed, so we planted this. It's a slightly smaller variety. It will create some repetition through the garden to have the same shape of blooms repeating. The Scentlandia is a shorter variety. It grows 2 to 3 feet, and it is supposed to have a longer bloom time and a stronger fragrance. Along with those, we planted some salvia and black-eyed Susan perennials, and we wanted to add plants that would bloom throughout the season. Prior to this, Charlotte said her yard only looked good for 1 week when all of the daylilies bloomed. To the left, we kept the existing boxwoods and moved some iris into a bare spot. We weren't on a huge budget, but we were just trying to use what she had and keep what was worth keeping. We added the redbud tree where another tree had died. She did get the stump ground out before we planted that. My main goal in choosing plants for this yard was to choose things that would thrive on neglect because Charlotte was not a gardener. So if it's in this video, then it's not high maintenance. Here we are back in the area where the little Henry itea is planted, which, by the way, that is a native plant. This large rock was unearthed during the project, and I told Charlotte it would look great by her dry creek bed. She had her sons and some of their friends move it from the other side of the yard. This area under the maple tree had some struggling azaleas, which do tend to struggle in our area. And surprise, surprise, more daylilies. Lots of rock was moved out of the area, and it was tricky with all those maple roots. We then filled in with dirt, trying not to cover the roots too much. The maple roots were a pretty solid mat, so it was tricky planting the 3 astilbe. The variety is red oak. Then we planted some ground cover that I knew would be okay if the maple tree took away all of the water, a sedum, and a big root geranium. I chose massive hosta varieties, knowing that they may not grow as big as they normally would due to this root competition. The lime green hosta is a sum and substance. I don't remember the variety of the other hosta. This area was a blank slate with only river rock and weeds to be removed. Then we planted 3 gold spirea and 2 blue star junipers with a quickfire hydrangea on the corner. I have the blue star juniper and the gold spirea planted in my yard, and I think they look really nice together in the spring when they both have fresh new leaves coming out. In this area on the south side of her covered porch, we left the existing irises but removed the river rock the best that we could, and then added just a little bit of mulch. So here we are looking back down to her dry creek bed at the very end of the yard, and then we have her hedge of boxwoods. Underneath this tree, she had some lyrope. We just cleared out the rocks and the daylilies in this area. And she bought this arbor for her back gate. We planted 2 Jackmani clematis, one on either side. And then we get to her hydrangea garden. We decided to do a variety of hydrangeas in this area. We have an incredible, a ruby slippers oak leaf, a turtlehead native perennial, and then I believe this is a blush smooth hydrangea. The area to the left of this tree is where we took off in the heat of July and August. We kind of decided not to plant anything at that time because not only was it getting too hot, but the plants that we were wanting to buy were getting harder to find. We did put in the one Annabelle hydrangea, which was taken from my yard, and the intention was that we would plant more hydrangeas in this area in the future. I can't remember what this large bush is in the corner, but possibly a burning bush, which she cut back to rejuvenate. In front of that, she has a Weigela wine and roses or spilled wine. Not sure, but those were my 2 suggestions. I'm not sure which one she ended up planting. And then I'm also not sure about the variety on that smaller panicle hydrangea. But the 3 larger panicle hydrangeas to the left are limelights, which she had at her last house, and she really wanted them again. I had no complaints because I think that's a great plant. And then there are also some daisies from my garden, which kind of just happened to be available when we cleared out this area. Now we are getting to a sunnier area of her yard again. You can see that we had lots of landscaping blocks and bricks and river rock to clean out. The only thing alive over here, other than the weeds, was irises. We left most of those irises. Charlotte says she's probably going to dig some of them out, make the clumps a little bit smaller. She said from the beginning that she really wanted peonies in her garden. This was the last part of the yard that we cleared out. I knew that I wanted to plant peonies and daffodils here, both of which are ideal to plant in the fall. We have added 7 peonies. They were planted from bare root, so they will take some time to establish, but she did get a few blooms this year. In a few years, they should fill in nicely. I really like to plant daffodil bulbs with peonies because the red shoots of the peonies look great with the yellow and white flowers. But another benefit is that the peonies will cover the fading daffodil foliage later in the spring. Here you can see that there are quite a few daffodil bulbs. These should fill in nicely in the next few years. We also planted a clematis in this area. Along the side of the house here is a hot, sunny area, so I planted some low-maintenance, tried-and-true plants that can take our hot sun. We planted tall Asiatic lilies, Husker red penstemon, Walker's low catmint, and some tall sedum. And we just repeated them down the length of the flower bed. Charlotte was able to hire someone to build this wall at some point along the way. My original plan called for catmint and salvia in this area, and I thought it would look nice spilling over, but then she informed me that they didn't want any plants that would attract bees because her husband is allergic. So that was a new challenge for me. They also wanted some taller things for privacy from the neighbors on the side of the patio. I chose a sand cherry, knowing that it only blooms for a short time in the spring, and I don't remember seeing a lot of pollinators on it. I also chose a blue muffin viburnum for that same reason, and then a sea green juniper for some evergreen interest. Here they are when we first planted them last year. You can see that creeping Jenny that we underplanted them with is very happy. Their backyard backs to a green space, so we didn't need privacy on this back row, and we wanted to keep that more low growing. I planted a sunsparkler sedum, which has reddish leaves, because I've not seen nearly as many bees on those type of sedums as I have on the tall sedums. And then I also planted a creeping phlox. Last year, I also planted a few annual sweet potato vines. This photo is from last year, and you can see that I was trying to create interest with varying foliage colors with the red, the chartreuse, and the green. However, the sweet potato vine not only took over the whole bed, but also the whole patio. So that was a fail. When I came back this week, I suggested that she plant some golden oregano, which would be much more well-behaved and just maintain a little bright green mound. And then you can see the hydrangea area is off to the right of their patio, which I have found that bees are not particularly attracted to hydrangeas, especially my incredible hydrangeas. I rarely see bees on those. You may have noticed earlier that I said Charlotte was not a gardener, but halfway through this process I asked her if she was just going to maintain the garden or if she thought she would continue gardening in the future, and she said she thought she'd been bit by the gardening bug, which made me so happy. Remember that this is only 1 year in, and it is the end of July right now, so I'm sure things looked a lot better in like May. Things tend to leap on year 3, so I really can't wait to see it then. I hope that you were able to get some ideas for some different areas of your yard, maybe sun or shade or wet areas or dry areas. Thanks for watching.